we're doing a cozy video today. It's cloudy-ish outside, cold, got my tea. So today I'm gonna chat with you about 3 things I wish I knew before I got houseplants. So basically, I got my first houseplant at a Whole Foods like a couple years ago, just because it seemed cute, like something to have around the house. I finally did some research almost a year later and I got another plant, and that's what kind of spiraled my plant addiction, you could say. So most of the time I would do research, but basically at the beginning I just wanted like every plant that I could get my hands on that would like be good in my environment. And some of the research that I was doing was pretty contradictory because I wasn't really sure what I was doing. I wasn't really sure what to look for half the time, so I ended up killing a few. But this is what this video is for. If you're thinking about getting houseplants and you don't know where to start, you don't know what questions to ask, you don't know what to look up, I will help you. So basically there are 3 questions that you have to ask yourself before even thinking about getting plants. So the first question is, what kind of light do you have? So one thing to look up is the direction that your windows are facing. I know that sounds really weird, but see if you have a south-facing window, east, north, west, you know, all that stuff. You have like a blocked view. So say you have a south-facing window, but there's a giant building in front of you and there's not that much light that's coming in. Do you keep the shades down for the entire day, or do you keep them open? You also need to find out if you have direct or indirect light. So direct light means that if you put your arm out and you see rays of light on your skin, that's direct light. Indirect light is just kind of like if the room is ambiently bright or whatever. The second question to ask yourself is, how much of a time and energy commitment can you give to your potential plants? So this would be things like tracking your watering, the humidity needs of your plant, the leaf cleaning, the repotting. If you don't know how to do these things, you either need to find someone that can help you with them, or you need to figure out how much energy you're willing to give to your plants, because if you think it's just watering every once in a while, then unfortunately you're mistaken. Keeping all of that in mind is kind of like gauging how much energy you're willing to put into a plant. And the third question that you need to ask yourself is, does it fit in with your lifestyle? So if you travel a lot, you probably don't want to get something like a fern, because you need to water that once a week, and if you're gone for a week, it'll be dead by the time you get back. Another thing to keep in mind is if you get overwhelmed by tasks a lot that like build up, then maybe just stick to a few houseplants versus a lot of houseplants. I have quite a few, and sometimes the amount of things that need to be watered and repotted is a little bit overwhelming. So those are the questions to ask yourself before even thinking about getting houseplants. There's a lot that goes into it. So if you think you're ready to get into plants, then here are the questions that you want to ask yourself before starting to get plants. So one thing that I really wish I knew before getting certain houseplants is the conditions under which it needed to thrive. So for example, you need to know all of these things about a plant. You need to know how much humidity it needs, if it needs filtered water, the frequency that you need to water it, if it needs fertilizer or how often it needs fertilizer, indirect versus direct sunlight. So we talked about those a little bit earlier in terms of like if you have it or not, or if you have the energy to provide all these things, but you need to find out what each plant needs. I'll put up a little infographic thing on the screen right now to figure out what kind of light you have in your house and what kind of light certain plants like. So that'll help you figure out what plants would work best in your space or in each different room you have. So some other plants need filtered water versus tap water. Sometimes the tap water is too harsh for them and they get crispy edges. Figuring out what each plant actually needs before getting it, because sometimes I would just be like, hey, I like this plant, and then get it and then have no idea what it actually needed, and it would be slowly dying. The second thing I wish I knew before getting plants was all about watering. So there's a lot of things about watering that I did not know about. So first of all, it's about the frequency of watering and not the amount that you're watering. So when you water, completely soak the plant all the way through, let the water drip out the bottom, or bottom water it for a while and let it completely soak itself. and then wait until it is dry or partially dry before watering again. And when you do water, soak it all the way through. Don't just add tiny amounts of water as you go, because that is not good. Another thing is some plants need filtered water. Certain things like peace lilies, calatheas, ferns, sometimes they get really dramatic about the kind of water that you're using to water them. And if there's hard minerals or anything in the water, it will cause the tips of the leaves to get brown and crispy. So if you use water that you've even left out for 24 hours, if you use a Brita filter, distilled water, whatever, that works better for certain plants than other plants. So you need to make sure you know which one is which and which is better for your plant. Another thing about watering is some plants like to be bottom watered versus top watered. So top watering is just like you see with like a little cup of water or a little watering can. You water over the top and it kind of just drenches the soil and drips all the way to the bottom, and all that's fine. Bottom watering is when you have a container and you put your plant in it and it soaks all the water up. You have to leave it for about, depending on how big the plant is, 10 to 45 minutes. So for some plants with sensitive leaves, like an African violet, for example, they don't really like to be top watered, but you can get away with it. I always bottom water because it's way easier. Same with a lot of my hanging plants, like my strings of things and my pothos and my philodendrons and stuff. I always bottom water because it's just easier to do that. Another thing that I really wish that I knew about watering before I got plants was they don't like to be watered as often in the winter time. At least in where I live in New York, it gets much grayer, much colder, and they do not like to be watered the same amount as you're watering them during the summer. Like I said, you need to wait for them to dry out completely or partially before you water them again. So if you are watering them the same frequency that you were doing before, they will get overwatered, they will get root rot, and they will die. So just keeping all those things in mind for watering, there's a lot more that goes into it than you think. So those are my tips for watering. And now the third thing that I wish I knew was that no matter how hard you try, you will not be able to keep all of your plants alive. There are way too many factors that go in. Sometimes it's just a matter of not doing enough research at the beginning, which is totally fine. It happens to the best of us. Sometimes it's not really knowing how to read the signals of a certain plant. Sometimes it just happens that the plant is a little bit too much for you to handle in terms of your brain capacity, your lifestyle, kind of your energy levels. Don't feel bad about yourself when that happens. You are more important than your plants. You can always get more plants, okay? So just keep that in mind. Other things that can happen are just plain old overwatering or underwatering. At the beginning, you're probably gonna end up overwatering a lot of your plants because it's really common. You kind of just wanna love them so much that you just keep watering them and they die. That happened to me a lot. Now my problem is underwatering, so a few of my plants have gotten so thirsty that I've been like, ooh, okay, gotta bring you back to life. And it happens. And another thing that can happen is sometimes the plant just doesn't like your space. I don't know why this is. Sometimes it's about the humidity, the light, the energy. I have no idea, but honestly, I've had certain plants where no matter what I did, even if I thought I was giving it all of the things that it wanted, it would just be so unhappy, and no matter what I did, it would be ugly and sad and dying. So sometimes you just have to give up on those plants or give them to someone else. Another thing that can happen is pests. So no matter how hard you try, you will eventually get pests. And it happens to the best of us. Sometimes it doesn't happen very often. Sometimes it's very manageable. So fungus gnats happen when you overwater your plants or top water them. Sometimes bottom watering or letting them dry out a little bit helps. Thrips, spider mites, mealybugs, all of these things. You can help get rid of these things with some neem oil solution or insecticidal soap. But honestly, it happens and you can either treat it and figure it out or unfortunately say goodbye to the plant. Before we end the video, there's just a lot of really great communities for houseplants online, and my favorite are on Reddit. They can really help you get to know a little bit more about plants before you go crazy buying them. Obviously, kind of like start out with a few and then learn a bit more before getting more. Online communities were the reason why I am as knowledgeable as I am about houseplants. That's all for today's video. I hope it was helpful for you. I love houseplants very much and I have a lot of knowledge to share. So please let me know in the comments if you want to know anything else about houseplants, and I will be sure to do a video on it. So with that said, that's all I have to share today. So I'll see you guys again next week. Bye! Bye!